discipline. And the third point here, I would like to insert Bhutan's case. There is also a reason to believe that in educating citizens in specialized fields, countries like Bhutan and India believed that they could contribute to the socio-economic life of the country. These are the major three standpoints that focus on how knowledge is institutionally organized and structured. From this, let me move on to what is discipline in higher education. We know very well that knowledge is linked to discipline. When we say discipline, it is specialization in subjects. And by means of disciplines, we are talking about thought domains, because disciplines ensure thinking traditions in us. That thinking tradition has been formed by means of disciplines, and that's how knowledge domain was taking shape too. But yet, if we look at the features of discipline, they are a little tricky, because the thought domain and the knowledge domain are also quasi-stable. We can't say that they are stable, they are rigid. The feature of discipline in itself is quasi. It is quasi-stable because they tend to change and evolve. The stage of becoming continues. And then disciplines are also partially integrated because they are internally fragmented and also specialized for these two reasons. And thirdly, they are semi-autonomous intellectual conveniences because of the reason the boundary of each discipline cannot be clearly defined. Where it ends, we cannot clearly demarcate the end of your discipline and the beginning of another discipline. The boundaries cannot be clearly marked, which keeps and makes the disciplines semi-autonomous in one sense or the other. Here itself, we can see the promising encounter with interdisciplinarity, because discipline is not very rigid. It remains quasi-stable, partially integrated, and semi-autonomous, paving way for interdisciplinary approaches and promotion of this new horizons to learn new things and to accommodate and extend the knowledge. Therefore, Parker 2002 puts forward the notion that discipline is a complex structure, and to be engaged in a discipline is to shape and be shaped by the subject. That's what happens when we are engaging with any literary subject or any other subject. And it helps us to be part of a scholarly community. And this conference is very much the best example that brings intellectuals together in one community to share the scholarly engagements, deliberations, and ideas. That is what this disciplinarity and interdisciplinarity interaction is trying to communicate and to engage with fellow students. This is to become disciplined. That's why I have begun my talk with underscoring the point that disciplines ought to become disciplined. And here I would like to draw the distinction between subject and discipline. Subject, we know that it is skill and knowledge based, whereas discipline is modeled along the lines of wisdom that provides value and rationale for the acquisition of the subject. In this sense, Clark points out two ways of approaching the study of higher education. On the one hand, disciplines pressurize institutions. We undergo this process and we experience this in our day-to-day work life. Disciplines create pressure. They put pressure on institutions to be scholarly and also to be interested in research. Similarly, institutions tend to pressure disciplines in order to be student-centered. Institutions always wanted every discipline to be student-centered, more student-oriented in the pedagogy, in the teaching learning strategies. And it is also interested to create a cognizant in students in the other fields of study. Traditionally, if we look at disciplines, they displayed a high degree of resistance to external change. Even Oxford and Cambridge are not exceptions to this resistance. Primarily, this resistance is due to the self-sufficiency of their organization. But this attitude is changing now for good. Like culture, when we talk about culture, it mutates. That's the fundamental characteristic of culture. Like that, disciplines are now subject to mutation and proliferation. And this is more pronounced in some disciplines than in others. And the discipline I would like to cite as an example here is humanities. And it spills out, the proliferation spills out from the dynamic centers to the more placid peripheries. If I could give an example from the two-day deliberations that we have had, scholars are moving from core areas because due to the sheer increase in the number of scholars in the core areas of specialization, they are moving to fragmented zones. Yesterday, I was chairing a session on disability and medical humanities papers. And this presentation on medical humanities had a particular paper on Khalid Hosseini's novel And the Mountains Echoed. The presenter has moved away from the thrust areas of the narrative. If we look at the themes of this narrative, it mainly revolves around socio-political history of Afghanistan, or the history of Afghanistan mainly, or the power of love. These are the thrust areas of this narrative. But interestingly, this presenter has moved away from all these thrust areas to a fragmented zone known as care ethics. And the focus of this paper was on the injured and the care and the empathy that the injured demands and how it is solicited among the suffering people due to in the war-torn Afghanistan. When such fragmented zones combine, hybridization occurs. And the result is this text had fallen under another interesting area, that is health humanities. This was presented under health humanities and broadly under the paradigm of medical humanities. Here itself, we can see a profound example of the interaction that has happened between disciplines. And digital humanities, environmental humanities, petrofiction, memory studies, we have had sessions in this conference on all these areas. They speak volumes about the interdisciplinary approach that this conference tried to build on and promote. And some of the key words that I would like to draw your attention to are specialization, fragmentation, and hybridization, which works as a cyclic process in the university and institutional framework. So this is how the interaction mainly happens. You can just go through this quote. This is from the e-journal. I have brought this quote from the e-journal titled Interculture by Lay. In recent decades, the autonomy of many academic disciplines has given way to a greater or lesser extent, and there is an era of interdisciplinarity that is emerging, and theory, as rightly pointed out by the previous speaker, theory is born out of this moment. And here comes an unstable fusion. There is no stability here. The fusion keeps changing of literary studies, linguistics, and psychoanalysis. How can we forget psychoanalysis? 20th century has changed the phase of literature by introducing Freudian psychology and psychic theory into literature. And we started analyzing the characters by looking at their thought process through stream of consciousness. And now more comes into literature. We are joining hands with anthropology, history, Marxism, philosophy, gender, queer studies. This becomes a postmodern assemblage that displaces the modernist formalism, which had been dominant from 1930s to 60s. And this kind of new year postmodern interdisciplinarity reflects difference, heterogeneity mainly, and it proliferates. This is how mutation and proliferation becomes the fundamental aspect of interdisciplinarity, because several dozen new disciplines are coming and joining hands, such as media studies. I have a good example from the curriculum of Royal University of Bhutan, where we have courses like English media. That is the combination. English geography, English environmental studies, called as English EVS, We have had such combinations in the past, and some combinations are continuing in the present. And the other areas that we have deliberated in this conference are also part of this interdisciplinary approach, such as disability studies, science studies, area studies, queer studies, etc. Significantly, these fields they directly challenge modern humanistic objectivity, and they also challenge the idea of university as a serene ivory tower. That idea is challenged now, and university departments had been organized, but they were disengaged. But now this interconnection and inter and intra engagements are promoted. But one hitch in this is there is a struggle against the hegemonic order. The hegemony of disciplinarity continues. Therefore, we have to submit to the requirements of modern disciplinarity, which is measured by means of standards, certification, and some of its methods and tools we have to subject ourselves to. They are exams, examination, academic exercises, ranking, supervision, and all other norms. In this sense, postmodern interdisciplinarity has become a mixed phenomenon. And here I would like to introduce two main threads of interdisciplinarity. It tries to fill the interstitial gaps because disciplinarity left vacant. Certain gaps are left vacant. They were not investigated. There was some limitation in disciplinarity in terms of creativity, innovation, as well as in its limited boundaries to know the truth. Now, with time, new patterns of inquiry emerges, and that has become inevitable. And by means of hybridization, we are all becoming academic hybrid critics to gain fresh insights, to look at our own parent discipline for its lacuna and gaps. And also it opens widely newer perspectives and horizons to our learning of literature. That is how the interstitial gaps are getting filled when there is a shift from disciplinarity to interdisciplinarity. Secondly, in terms of transcendence, it surpasses, interdisciplinarity actually surpasses what disciplinarity can ever hope to achieve, because in one sense, disciplinarity is perceived as not lending itself to address the problems of the real world. I came across a report on the linkages of universities and communities, and one chapter in this report was interestingly and ironically titled as "Communities Have Problems, Universities Have Departments." Where is the meeting point? The problems of the real world are not getting addressed by the subjects and by the learning that happens in the ivory tower of university. There is no meeting point that helps the learners to address the problems of the real world. We cannot deny the fact for most of the 20th century, knowledge has been formed and framed and shaped by disciplinarity. But what is the mandate requirement today is the shift from the disciplinary divide to transcendence of disciplines. And this is not just to create a connection, but to question, to promote, and to instill in students and researchers a curiosity-driven inquiry by making them travel in the new lands of disciplines. In this way, interdisciplinarity bridges the fragmented disciplines, and it mobilizes intellectual resources for greater social justice and for rationality. One historical account I would like to quickly draw our attention to is in 1960s, there had been a student unrest in the US to remove the disciplinary structure and to replace it with holistic concepts which are closer to practical life. And this is how interdisciplinarity denotes reform, innovation, and progress. And this shift is currently happening in this 21st century because disciplines are not static wholes. They are also variables with a tendency to evolve. And this evolution happens as a cyclic process by virtue of fragmentation. And then there is a recombination, which I called it and mentioned as hybridization. This is the key concern I would like to point out. how diverse insights from various disciplines can be integrated. This is a million-dollar question. This week, I had a board of studies meeting with one of the colleges where interdisciplinary program has been introduced. It is titled as History Through Literature. Yes, 2 literary texts are prescribed and some historical movements were also part of that syllabus. But where is the meeting point? When we bring diverse insights from history and literature from 2 different disciplines, how to integrate them? That becomes the question. That is the curiosity-driven inquiry where we have to expose the gaps and we have to strengthen the connections and we have to also stimulate cross-fertilization of ideas. It is not just 2 parallel track running like a train track, but we have to cross-fertilize the ideas when 2 disciplines are brought together to create a new field of focus for knowledge inquiry. That is what this quote also sums up. And now coming to the second half of my presentation, the mode of relation in RUB curriculum, if I take that into account, there is addition or accumulation of knowledge when we bring 2 different fields or 2 or more different fields to frame a subject or a module. And this is mainly to address a common goal. This practice was established in the RUB curriculum way back in 2010 itself, it was established. And the common goal was job opportunities. That is the reason I told it differs from geographical location to location. In the case of Bhutan, it is to create multiple job opportunities for students. That's the reason they tried to make it more than a specialized field by combining English and Zonka and English and media studies, mathematics, physics and chemistry. This classification could be called as pluridisciplinary, where there is some relation between the 2 disciplines that are brought together. And this had been a success. English Zonka. Zonka is the national language of Bhutan. And these 2 languages, when students are trained in English, which is the global language, and also the official language, and Zonka, the national language, the local and the global needs are met. And that strengthened the students, and there were ample opportunities for such students in the civil service examination, as well as in bureaucratic roles and jobs. And English media studies is gaining popularity now, media being the talk of the country. That combination, but as I said, there is some lacuna here. There is the absence of challenge. They are traveling on a parallel track and they are not integrated very well. That's the challenge we perceive now, and we are trying to fix those challenges. And physics and chemistry cannot be studied without the application knowledge of mathematics is the fact. Therefore, maths, physics, and physics chemistry, such combination courses were part of the curriculum. And one more interdisciplinary approach we had way back in 2010 and 11, 12, 13, then gradually we phased out. Now, after while preparing for this conference and after doing some research on interdisciplinary concerns, I was really thinking why we have phased out such programs. We made it independent and individual programs. We had English and EVS. We tried to split that and we made it English studies as a separate program and EVS, BSc EVS as a separate program, without knowing how to create an interaction and an integration between these 2 viable and more important disciplines. Today, when I look back in retrospect by means of research, I see a lot of possibilities and potential outcomes when we have English and EVS together. When we talk about environmental humanities, we had yesterday the keynote speaker, Professor Scott Slovic, talking about cognitive psychology and environmental humanities. That is the meeting point. That is the integration, literary ecology. Even Gulsar's poems, I was about to talk from the perspective of biocentric ethics, how we can draw principles of ecology to study literature. Similarly, we had English geography. We introduced this program because Bhutan always participates in climate change action in IC mode. IC mode is functioning from Nepal. And we are part of this regional cooperation on climate action and to save Himalayas. Therefore, English geography was another prosperous discipline that we have had, but then we phased out, thinking those job opportunities are over for students in the market after conducting a need assessment survey. But in terms of research, there are a lot of prospects. We can look at it from cultural geography point of view. There are cultural geographers, and human geography is another type of geography, making places with an emphasis on cultural interaction brings these disciplines together. These are some of the modes of interaction by which the disciplines can be integrated. Lastly, I want to talk about Heckhausen's 6 types of interdisciplinarity, which falls under curriculum mix-ups, and only one type I'm taking here in connection with the context, that is indiscriminate interdisciplinarity, which is practiced in undergraduate studies. So when we say indiscriminate interdisciplinarity, what we are doing is not specializing, but we are just introducing students to various fields of study, and that is to counteract disciplinarity. And this is also known by the name restrictive, because we are not specializing, making students specialists. Rather, we are trying to just introduce them to various fields of study, allowing students to explore more on their own. Therefore, there are certain restrictions in this interdisciplinarity, which is called by the term restrictive. And one another emerging trend in the discussion at RUB is a unitary type of inquiry. We are now again moving back to 4-year undergrad program by introducing 25% as breadth modules. And these breadth modules will also have 2 types. On the one hand, subject-related breadth modules will be taken by students. If mathematics is the core module, they will be taking physics and chemistry to counteract with it. And then interdisciplinary is another type of breadth module where English studies, students of literature can opt a paper from political science, sociology, according to their interest, based on their interest. If they are interested in computer programming, they can take some programming papers from computer science department or from EVS or from media studies. Even I remember during my master's studies, it is not offered in college, but we students were captivated by the introduction of computers and the GNIT, NIT, National, it is not National Institute, but NIIT was a very famous program, and they introduced a graduate program known as GNIIT, in which we all enrolled, and we did a separate course outside the university to become computer experts and to have some knowledge of computer science. That's how students' interest can be satiated by making them move beyond the disciplines. The envisioned outcome of this trend is to create a healthy and a positive link for the community outreach. That is the link between university and community to address the real life practical problems of the world. With this, I would like to come to an end. And this is the picture of what's happening in Bhutan with reference to academics from the Royal University of Bhutan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chitra. That was a wonderful walk through, starting from disciplines to interdisciplinarity. You walked us through thought domains, specializations, the quasi-stable nature of discipline, the semi-autonomous nature of discipline. You differentiated between subject and discipline, and you talked about the proliferation of disciplines and gave a very relevant example from humanities, and you linked it with the talk yesterday by Professor Scott Slovic. And you came on to the actual curriculum in the Royal University of Bhutan, and you have expressed the concerns and the million-dollar question, as you said, how can diverse insights from various disciplines, how can they be integrated? And you have provided some kind of a theoretical solution, that is pluridisciplinarity, wherein we can bring in many disciplines together, and each we can break the silos and bring out courses which can wherein the students can take not just one single discipline, but they can have, actually we in India have open courses, and something similar you had
Yes.
mentioned in Royal University of Bhutan. And we would have loved to hear you speak about Gulzar's poems from a biocentric ethic point of view, but then maybe some other time. So thank you,
Yes.
Dr. Chitra, for
Yeah.
that.
Thank you. Hope I'm on time.
Oh, yes, you're very much on time. Now we'll move on to the last talk of the session, and that is by Dr. Jai Singh. Jai Singh, sir, has been collaborating with us in the past year also, when we held an international conference on post-humanism. This time it is interdisciplinarity. Jai sir is an associate professor in the Department of English and Foreign Languages, University, Hyderabad. And his areas of specialization are contemporary theory, post-colonial theory and literature, Indian writing in English, diaspora literature, feminism, cultural studies, Orientalism, and digital humanities. He has done his MPhil and PhD, MPhil in culture and hegemony, a study of Orientalism, and his PhD thesis on positioning Orientalism in the novels of Amitav Ghosh. And he has presented, he has published 38 papers. He's been resource person in 54 conferences. He's got 4 newspaper publications. He's actually done an interview with Amitav Ghosh, and he's an editor in multiple research journals. So we are very glad to have you, not only as an organizing secretary, but also as a resource person. So Jai sir, may I warmly invite you to present your plenary on the topic, the rise of the modern disciplines and interdisciplinary interaction, understanding theory and literature in the contemporary age. Over to you, Jai sir.
So thank you, ma'am. And it's nice to connect with all of you. My brother Shri from Bangladesh and sister Chitra from Bhutan. So we are talking about interdisciplinarity, and we are sitting in an international session. So it's nice to connect with all of you. So first, I would like to discuss a little bit about the term interdisciplinarity. Interdisciplinary studies is not a new thing, rather it is the first thing that took shape with the human civilization. Human beings are interdisciplinary from the very beginning. They are used to do so many works at the same time. So human nature is by its own nature is interdisciplinary. Human nature itself is interdisciplinary. Then why we need this interdisciplinarity in 2021? Because with the new criticism and all that, and the establishment of departments, specialized departments in the universities, and slowly the departments became compartments, watertight compartments, and they confined themselves to their own disciplines. And this is how from disciplinary to interdisciplinary we have to move. Again, we are talking about the interdisciplinarity. If I go into the first use of the term interdisciplinarity, most of the interdisciplinary scholars agree that the first use of this term was by US Social Science Research Council in 1920. Means around the same time when new criticism was there and departments were being compartmentalized. Later on, it was the Organization for Economic Cooperations and Developments which formalized the term, and after that it is popularized from 1972 onwards. Now, there is a lack of consistency in the understanding of what is truly interdisciplinary. or agreement on basic definitions of interdisciplinarity. In interdisciplinary, now there are certain questions before us. Is interdisciplinarity what happens in the gaps between disciplines? Suppose there is some gap between two disciplines, it is located there, or it is located in the overlap, one discipline overlaps another discipline. And then we have some other terms associated with interdisciplinarity, like transdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity, etc. And they are used by different research groups or in different national cultures. When we talk about the importance of this amalgamation of different disciplines, I'm reminded of Kobe Beecher, who wrote a book, Academic Tribes and Territories. In this book, he describes how academic subcultures form around disciplines which, as they grow more specialized, have fewer things in common in their background and in their daily problems. So the departments are different, like physics and literature, or chemistry and literature. They seem quite different. In daily, day-to-day life, there is hardly anything common between chemistry and literature. But if we look closely, it's very much there. If something happens in the field of chemistry, it is bound to influence the field of literature as well. And for example, when printing ink was discovered, the literature was not same. After that, there were radical changes in the writing of literature, in the understanding of literature, in the perception and dissemination of literature. It reached to far off places where it could not reach without that printing ink. Though on the surface level, these disciplines don't interact with each other, but of course they influence each other. Tony Beecher further points out that an important part of establishing the cultural identity of a discipline is that this symbolism and the specialist term that plays is beyond the reach of an uninitiated audience. The tribes of academic define their own identities and define their own patches of intellectual ground by employing a variety of devices geared to the exclusion of illegal immigrants. To be admitted to membership of a particular sector of the academic profession involves a proper measure of loyalty to one's collegial group and of adherence to its terms. This is how the departments were compartmentalized. Historically, it was the affinity between the members of same department, and they slowly compartmentalized their own department. And now in 2021, in many places the situation is like this. If you are in one department, you cannot pursue the research in another department. And in a country like India, where we have very rigid syllabi, and where understanding of a particular department, syllabus, and all that is very rigid. Of course, we try to release the pressure, like UGC started choice-based credit system, and very wonderfully, this choice-based credit system gives choice only to the UGC, not to the universities, not to the teachers, not to the students. It is choice-based credit system only in name. Otherwise, there is no choice in it except the word choice, because everything is decided by the UGC and it is on the UGC website. Forget which university you are in, but of course it is not that strongly imposed. But if you follow the UGC guidelines, you don't have any other choice. So entire India will read the same set of books and perhaps same set of questions and answers. Under such circumstances, what kind of interdisciplinarity we can talk of? forget that interdisciplinarity. I know a professor who did not supervise anybody who does not belong to his area of specialization. And he specializes in only one author, and he says, I will not supervise anybody outside that author. So, and in such circumstances, this conference has a lot of importance, lot of value. Now, I will talk about what are the pressures for interdisciplinarity. There are so many pressures. Pressures to cross disciplinary boundaries in conducting research can arise from a variety of reasons. The resulting models and approaches have been variously described as interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, cross-disciplinary. Such an approach is not new. If we go back, looking back to Darwin's integrative theory of evolution, the European Enlightenment, or further back to Renaissance, would suggest that previous eras were much less constrained by the disciplinary boundaries than our own. Although for some time now there has been a separation between natural sciences and people as a subject for scientific study. And here, Klein warns that focusing on interdisciplinarity as a new opens it up to being dismissed as a fad. So there is one danger associated with interdisciplinarity, is that it can become a fad. Just like anything else, feminism became a fad, and Dalit studies. There was a fashion. Everybody was writing on Dalit studies. Then feminism, everybody is a feminist. And the people who are not feminist in any sense, they also became feminists when it was in fashion. Some 20 years back, you go to any conference, out of 100 paper presenters, almost 20 to 30 will be feminists. So the same danger is inherent in the interdisciplinary studies as well. Now, when we talk about that before 1920s and all that, when universities were and the colleges were little different than today's time, and people were working freely in the area of their choice. Was it really interdisciplinary? Means one dimension of interdisciplinarity is there is one scholar, he works in different dimensions. He is trained in one, but he trains himself and then he keeps working in different areas. And this is how one kind of interdisciplinarity comes before us. Here, one name is very important because this name is, he did a lot of research, and this name is James Prinsep. James Prinsep was trained as an engineer. He got a job at Calcutta Mint. Then he started working in the field of Orientalism, and he was fellow at the Royal Society. He studied the temple architecture, designed new mint building at Banaras. He conducted a survey of the Banaras and produced an accurate map. He was an engineer. Then he did a job in mint, and then he designed temple architectures. Then he studied temple architectures and designed mint building. Then he surveyed Banaras and produced an accurate map at the scale of 8 inches to a mile. And this map was very well received. Was lithographed in England. Then he helped in restoring many minarets of the Aurangzeb's time, which were in very bad shape at that time. Then he also restored, he also worked on a canal that connected Hooghly with Ganga. Then the story doesn't end here. He was also interested in the study of coins. He interpreted coins from Bactria, Kushan, and many other kingdoms up to Gupta kingdom. And the story doesn't end here also. Then he deciphered Brahmi script. So all in one, so many disciplines in one man. So this is one example of interdisciplinarity. Another is two scholars from two different fields can come together and work and then come up with something new. Here I have two examples. One is Deleuze and Guattari. One was a philosopher, one was a psychoanalyst, psychiatrist. Both came together and wrote so many books. And there is another example of Watson Crick and Franklin and Wilkinson. So they came together and worked on DNA structure, and they elaborated the DNA structure, which radically changed the potential for new discoveries and shifted the direction of many fields in the biological sciences, in the just wait a minute. Sorry for this disruption. Yes, they came together and on the one hand, Watson with a background in microbiology and Crick with a background in agricultural research, both working in the physics laboratory, were more like intellectual butterflies seeking relevant, crucial insights provided by chemist Irvin Kharjaf and Jerry Dono, passing through Cambridge University where the group was working. So you see, people from different backgrounds. So one is agricultural scientist, one is microbiologist, and they are working in the physics laboratory, and they are using the formulas developed by a chemist, from a scientist from chemistry. So they come together and work. That's also an example of interdisciplinarity. Now, the biggest question before us is, what is interdisciplinarity? Undoubtedly, we live in the age of interdisciplinarity, which is increasing further and further. Creative researchers find scope for adventurous work at the interface of disciplines, and funding organizations recognize that many problems facing society, social demands research that crosses disciplinary boundaries. After decades of increasing specialization in the academic enterprise, more recent funding programs have attempted to promote interdisciplinary research as a means to encourage scientific and technological advance and to foster its more effective use in society, so that we can harness research outputs for economic development and improved quality of life. Internationally, the research funding trend is towards ever more focus on interdisciplinary and impacts beyond academia. But interdisciplinary research does not occur automatically. We should know it. It's not, okay, one person from chemistry, one person from physics, one person from biology, and one person from literature met in a cafeteria, have a cup of tea, and they are talking about, okay, we are in a very bad times, and the world is going to dogs. There is no respect for anything in this age. The student should be taught some moral values, and their talk ends here. That is not interdisciplinary. So interdisciplinary research does not occur automatically, even when money is available. You give lots of money for interdisciplinary research, we are doing it, but we know what happens actually. It's not a simple case of aggregating several disciplines into one research project. Extra effort is needed to achieve the promise of synergy and to form a genuinely cohesive team that combines expertise from several specializations, yet the sustained development of strategies to help researchers understand how to collaborate effectively and integrate soundly across different domains remains a key research gap. Disciplinary and interdisciplinary research approaches are both essential to produce knowledge and solve problems, but much of the existing literature focuses primarily on discussions of the relative merits of these respective forms of research, and there is still a dearth of guidance and interdisciplinarity as a way of doing research. So, as it's clear, just pumping in money is not a solution. We need the people who have interdisciplinary mindset, or actually everybody has an interdisciplinary mindset, who can get out of the disciplinary mindset which is imposed on them since they get admission into the education system from nursery class up to post graduation level. Our education system up to post graduation level is not interdisciplinary, it is not transdisciplinary, it is strictly disciplinary. And all of a sudden, when they reach the post PhD level, we want them to be interdisciplinary. That is something impossible. We spend 20 years in making them disciplinary, and then we want them to be interdisciplinary all of a sudden. Here I'm reminded of a very nice statement about this process of interdisciplinarity and how this interdisciplinarity is not a simple thing, it is a movement. I read this quotation: if in response to new conditions, the research processes of interdisciplinarity foster the particular space of ideation as limen, as threshold, or as interstice, then they also function like nodes in a network, as space, inter or in between movement, as Nicholas Salazar Sutil argues, might be about the physical locatedness of human movement, but still it might also be conceived in terms of electronic location within global networks. In this shifting of positions beyond the linear accumulation of ideas, our argument goes further. Interdisciplinarity implies more than space, it implies movement. So interdisciplinarity is actually a kind of movement, what we might define as multidimensional properties of images, objects, or thought changing in time and space. So interdisciplinarity can be defined as a multidimensional properties of images, objects, or thought changing in time and space. As such, this alternative paradigm involves a spatial and temporal realization of any movement that precedes or follows it, as well as recognition of mobility as a process of sensitizing research to a particular situation within discourse, within art, within the social. We are not alone in mounting this argument for movement and experience as critical to the new formations of interdisciplinary research in cultural studies, sciences, social studies, and political theory, and many others. This realization of academic thinking as movement in terms of interdisciplinary research is dependent then upon acts of making or assembling, or likewise unmaking and disassembling. So with these words, I will like to end my talk. So now, I will also change the settings. People can unmute and they can ask questions if they have any questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Jay sir. You were speaking about the integration of diverse disciplines like sciences, agricultural sciences, humanities. So it was quite an eye opener for us. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for your paper. That was wonderful. And if the speakers would like to interact with each other, if you would like to ask questions. I think we can spare 10 minutes for that. And after that, Rohit Sebastian will be moving on to the vote of thanks. So if we would be glad if the four plenary speakers could interact with each other. If we have a little bit of time, we could ask each other some questions. Um, we had some very interesting topics like art and journalism versus specialist, and Dr. Chitra and her concerns about uh, the debates and on interdiscipline interaction and the curriculum, etc. And Jay sir has right now spoken about the rise of modern disciplines and interdisciplinarity. So if the speakers have questions, we welcome them.
I have one. It's not actually a question, it's not actually
Yeah,
I want to ask Professor Shri, what is the state of interdisciplinarity in Bangladesh? If people are doing research across departments, or just like India, they are confined to their own department.
Asking me, brother Jai Singh,
Since,
very true. In Bangladesh, the concept of interdisciplinarity is very weak in academic level. In fact, it is practiced worldwide, but still in most of the university curriculum, they are running on just one discipline. In fact, as you said, according to the British Academy, there were numerous ways that interdisciplinarity is practiced. And in fact, still we can't take it very seriously. I don't know why. Suppose academics may establish collaborations between disciplines to find areas to common interest, areas of common interest, or to identify new approaches to issue within each respective discipline. This might be disciplines that generally lie in the same field of study, such as economics and political science, thus forming the study of political economy. We can think in that way, but still we are lagging behind. Still we are lagging behind. I don't know what is the situation in Nepal, in Bhutan, or in India. I don't have any clear knowledge regarding that, but in our country, still we are lagging behind. Anything else?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Now, in India also, it's almost same. We talk a lot about interdisciplinarity, but there is hardly any interdisciplinarity. As I gave you the example, we started choice-based credit system, and the entire choice lies with only UGC. Earlier, the universities were free to choose the text they will teach at BA level, but now the UGC has decided, okay, you teach only these texts. Of course, not many universities are following it seriously, but the document is there on the UGC website. And in the first 2 years of its implementation, they pursued it seriously, but after that they also lost hope. And that is for good, because if entire India is going to study the same text, that's difficult.
But I think it is the high time to think on the issues, because if we don't pay attention or focus on interdisciplinarity, certainly South Asia will lag behind, because in the European countries, they have designed their curriculum in a different way, as you said, in the on interdisciplinarity, and they have developed methodology and pedagogy on that issues. So I think we should think on it very seriously, isn't it?
Yes.
In the case of India, if I take South India, some of the
Like
colleges,
Kerala, as I said,
some of the colleges in South India now are introducing one module on interdisciplinary program where they try to cultivate this trend.
That's very good, I think. And in fact, we don't have any other option because we may read literature, but right now, what is the demand of the corporate houses? Uh, After reading plain literature, you are not fit for job market. So
Yes.
they need more. They need technology or computer literacy with literature. So certainly you have to combine technological knowledges with
Yeah.
literature, with
Yes.
with philosophy. And
Yeah, truly. Yeah,
you have,
these are some of the examples that I try to cite in my talk. In the case of Bhutan, looking at the small population, they try to change the style. Every time when the program review comes, we try to look at the need assessment survey in the market, the job opportunities that prevail, and accordingly, we try to tune our course and programs so that it's met with the market needs also. And that's how we frame our syllabus.
I noticed in Bangladesh, yes, we have ICT, and students of any discipline can take ICT, but still it is on their choice. But I think it should be mandatory. Otherwise, after studying, suppose political science or management or finance and banking or anything else, without computer literacy or technological technologies on computer, they will not be fit for the job markets. And certainly they will lag behind in competing with other students in job market. I think in that way, and that is why in our country ICT has been introduced. But I think not only ICT, we must not prepare our students only for job markets. Certainly, they will work as a specialist on different discipline. I think so. I think literature should be merged with philosophy and history, and without a history, you can't have the perfect knowledge or full knowledge of anything. You notice, perhaps you know, when Nobel laureate Amartya Sen established the University of Nalanda, the first department he opened in his university was not economics, it was history. I think you know it. And it was his view that without the knowledge of history, no country can proceed faster. And everyone needs the knowledge of history. They have some, at least some knowledge of history, and that is why he opened a history first in his university. And I also think you may study on management, finance, banking, and accounting, or anything else, or political science. Certainly, you should have the knowledge of history, and it should be under some aspects of history. It must be compulsory, I think. Yeah? So I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I came across a course, History Through Literature. They
Yes.
try to bridge the gulf between the disciplines by introducing such programs where
Yes.
literature has historical representation and how to look at it.
In
Sir,
fact, literature has a very wide scope to incorporate all the discipline, either political science or history or philosophy or anything else. It has the wide scope to include all these things with it, isn't it? I think so, in that way.
Yeah, that's right. Ma'am, if there are any questions from participants, we can take.
Yes, yes. I have changed the settings. Anybody can unmute and ask.
No.
yes. If any of the participants have a question, you can unmute yourself.
I
and
think
you-
questions should come from them, as they should not be the passive listeners.
And sir, when we were talking about all these things, what we should do, what the system should do, I think some part of the fault lies with the teachers as well. For example, in IIT, they have the humanities and social sciences department,
Of
and they are
course.
not governed by UGC or any other agency. They have 100% freedom to design their courses. And when they have 100% freedom, they are teaching communication skills to engineering students. In 90% cases, their English is already so good, they don't need know how to write a resume. Now, if you are teaching a BTech student how to write a resume, then do you think you actually required in the institute?
I think students of science disciplines, I think they should have some human knowledge. A good doctor should be a good human being, isn't it? A
Yeah.
good engineer should be a good human being. But right now, you notice the competition in the job market is with doctors, engineers, and so on. But no one wants to be a good human being. But without a good human being, the nation can go ahead. I think a doctor should be a good human being. Otherwise, he will sell out the kidney with his skill by cutting the kidney when he is in the theater room. So I think without human knowledge, his learning or his profession cannot be complete. I think in that way. I don't know what you think.
Yeah. No, you are perfectly right. But means that is why the humanities and social sciences are introduced in the IITs. But they are not serving the purpose. They are teaching them how to write resumes or verbs and nouns and articles and all that stuff that they already know. So that is the wastage of resources. Instead of looking into the human civilization's complexities and the demands of the present age and what kind of demands will arise in future, they don't discuss all these things. In 90% cases, they are not even competent enough to discuss.
So I think we should put focus on the issues in the future, and
Probably.
mm, uh, we should design our curriculums in that way so that they should be skilled doctor, they should be skilled engineers, they should be skilled in his discipline, the main discipline. But I think they must have some human knowledge also.
Yes, that is required. That's why we have humanities and social sciences.
Yes, social science is another important subject. I think that should be included or incorporated, integrated with other subjects. I think it is very needed. I think badly needed in our curriculum. And in that way, the scope of teaching should be extended. Is there any more question from the participant side? I don't know.
Yeah, there is nothing in the chat box.
I think they should ask question because if they are not encouraged to ask questions, certainly I think we are not encouraged also. It is for them also. This arrangement is for them, mainly for them.
Yes. Perhaps the afternoon sun is seeping people's energy. Perhaps.
Oh,
I don't know.
might be.
Perhaps.
So if
Okay.
dear brother Dr. Jai Singh permits, certainly you can close the session, I think.
Yeah, ma'am.
We just have a few formalities left. So may I just invite Rohit to thank the speakers, and after that, yes, Jaisal, would you like to say something? Okay, may I invite Rohit, Sebastian to thank the speakers of the session.
Thank you. Our respected panelists, our most valued participants. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. On behalf of the organizing committee and the entire fraternity at Bharat, extend a very hearty note of thanks to all the speakers gracing this occasion and also for pioneering your essential work and sharing with us your findings and opinions today. I would also like to extend my sincerest gratitude to Dr. Sharif for his efforts towards explaining the concepts of consumption of art in the modern day society. I also must mention a deep sense of appreciation for the speaker, Dr. Komal Prasad Fuyal, for his explanations on the positives of focusing on the generalities over the specificities in disciplinary approaches. Furthermore, I'm also grateful to Dr. S. Chitra for demonstrating her topic of disciplinarity, its relevance, and its implementation in Bhutan. I also wish to express my gratitude to the final speaker, the organizing secretary of the event, Dr. Jay Singh, for his encouraging ruminations on the nature of interdisciplinarity. We are all inspired by your great words. Last but not the least, I cannot profusely thank everyone for their involvement and commitment in making this academic exercise a large success. Now, I invite our dynamic convener, Dr. Rose Sebastian, to speak the final words.
Hi everyone, good evening to one and all. I guess that everyone must have reached a saturation level by the end of the third day. So what I have here is a very brief and non-ornate vote of thanks. First and foremost, I thank the Royal University of Bhutan and Dr. Chitra for collaborating with us. And thank you so much, Jaisa, for facilitating this collaboration. I thank the management and the department of Bharat Mata College for their all kinds of support that they have offered. And I also thank all the keynote speakers. And it's not very often that we get to listen to such brilliant minds, and they've added so much value to this activity. Thank you so much. I thank all the chairs who have taken their time out to listen to the papers. Most of them had read the abstracts, some even the full papers, and they'd given detailed feedback and suggestions to the participants. I thank them for their magnanimity. I thank all the participants. The department intends to continue this program every year in future, and we hope to meet you in the coming years as well. Last but not the least, I express my love and gratitude to our HOD, Dr. Mini, and my co-conveners, Dr. Rohit and Christina, without whom this wouldn't have been possible. I thank one and all once again. We see you next year, hopefully.
Yes, Rose, that was nice. So I also extend my thanks to each and every person. Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Jessa. Thank you, Chitra ma'am. And let's hope to see each other in person sometime in the not so distant future, so that we can have a face-to-face here, actually a real conference, and we can possibly co-convene sometime and hope to meet each other in person.
Yeah, thanks to everyone. Thanks to everyone for the successful collaboration of this conference, starting from mentors to organizing secretary, conveners and co-conveners, to participants, keynote speakers, panelists, chairs, to everyone. Our heartfelt gratitude and thanks. And mainly to participants, valuable participants from both the colleges and from other institutions. This platform has brought and united two institutions together, and let's stay connected and grow and enrich ourselves. Thank you.
A special thanks to all the participants from the Royal University of Bhutan. Thank you, Chitra ma'am, for that.
Yeah, thanks to my colleagues,
Such an active
Dr. K. Babushankar Rao and Dr. Sarmista Rai.
Special thanks to them also.
So thanks to everybody for making it a grand success.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
We
you
are
very
indebted
much.
to you.
Thank
We
you.
are
very much.
greatly indebted to you, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes,
You
sir.
are the bridge to connect both of us.
That's right.
Bridge to connect the geographical locations without any barriers.
That is the profit of benefit of COVID-19, isn't it?
Yes.
We are being connected at any time from anywhere of the world, but we don't expect it should longer anymore, because we want to come closer to each other and arrange this type of conference in presence. So hope it will come to an end, and hope we'll meet soon. So thank you for the organizers for giving me the space here, and participants who gave a very patient hearing to what we said here. Thank you everybody.
So I hope in the new year, very soon we will have one conference in physical space.
Yeah, sure. We hope so.
Sure. We hope so.
Okay, bye.
Yes.
Stay well. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Have a good day. Have a nice weekend. So we are having some thank you messages from the participants. Thank you.